Hey, everybody. Welcome to another special episode of the Fantasy Fiends podcast with just me, the Giant, this time. Stevie will be back on to Thursday night for their usual episodes, but we are enjoying the company of some pretty awesome authors to talk about curses. You know, I actually don't know anything about curses. I've never written any into my story, so this is going to be really, really fun. You know what? Why don't you all introduce yourselves so I don't have to do it for you, starting with Lee.
Hey there, everyone. My name's Lee. I'm the author of the Dead Sagas, which is like a horror book. They're like horror books and they're fantasy books. I'm not really sure whether I'm a fantasy author or a horror author or what. I'm not really sure, but definitely a combination of the two. Basically, a zombie apocalypse set in a sort of Viking-esque world. And yeah, I play guitar as well professionally, and wrote a few guitar books. And yeah, that's pretty much me, really.
Damn. Very cool. I did not know you were a guitarist. That's awesome. We'll have to circle back around to that. Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela J. Ford. I write epic fantasy and fantasy romance. And today I'll be talking a little bit about my Night of the Dark Fae series. I love superheroes, and so I thought it'd be really fun to write kind of a sort of dark superhero story. So that's what I have today. Very
cool. Craig.
Hello, I'm Craig. Nice to meet you. Be physically here. And I worked out how to unmute myself, so that's a good start. I'm CF Welburn, but I prefer Craig because if you call me C, it sounds a bit strange. I'm the author of The Ashen Levels, and as well as a few other books. And I apologize in advance if I look or sound in any way like the creatures from Lee's books, because I've had an 8-hour shift teaching 6th graders today, so I'm a little bit destroyed. I'll do my best.
Talk about superheroes, like being able to talk coherently after a day like that is like some next level intelligence. And last but not least, Kristen, who will be joining us in voice, if not via camera. Ooh.
Hi, I'm Kristin J Dawson, and I write epic fantasy. Short and sweet.
I love it. Well, you know what? Seeing as we're talking about curses, Kristen, tell us a little bit about the curse in your series that, you know, we're going to be sort of dealing with in this topic, in this panel.
You know, before I came onto the podcast, I did some thinking about curses, and I thought, you know, there's really a couple of different curses in my book, and one of them is a literal curse, and then one is where people believe they're cursed, because in my story, it's not they don't believe in a benevolent God, so they believe if you're noticed by their God, you're probably going to be cursed. So anything that is bad that happens to you, or any disability. So my main character has a stutter, and so they say, oh, your tongue has been cursed. And so that kind of puts her at odds with her community, because they feel like she's been physically cursed. But then there's also an actual curse that will kill you, and it's really obvious because it's like pustules and it's your flesh falls off. It's like the Black Plague, just, you know, a more extreme version. So yeah, so those are the two different kind of curses. One is like imagined by the people, and the other one is very real.
Very cool. Craig, what about you? What curses are you dealing with in your series?
In my series, The Ashen Levels, there's a variety of smaller curses, just for good measure. There's actually, in the second book, they go to various islands, and each island allowed me to kind of delve deep into my imagination and make some kind of strange curses. But I guess the overriding one would be with the Ashen themselves. And it's kind of a double-edged curse, because they're cursed with immortality, which obviously sounds like it's got more going for it than against it. But with that comes this kind of enslavement, this addiction, and also an amnesia. So they've had their memories taken from them. So I think the main character sums it up quite well with he says something like, "There's nothing at all depressing drinking for eternity whilst those around you wilt and die like the flowers through the seasons." But yeah, I guess there are other curses involved. There's another character as well, which is also immortal. But when he actually dies, he goes into the nearest living thing to him. So then he ends up remembering the deaths that he went through as well. So
Interesting. Very intriguing, novel use of curses. I like it. Angela, what about you? How do superheroes and curses go together?
So I think I started writing this book right when I was kind of watching a lot of Marvel movies. And I thought it'd be really cool to kind of take a superhero who's not kind of coming into their own and finding out their powers, but already knows how strong and how powerful they are and the limits of their power, and then to put them in a situation where they couldn't use them at all. And so my main character, Maeva Karn, she's been captured by the Dark Fae, and they put this magical collar on her, which is, the collar is, it's a magical item that has been cursed. And so that's one of the curses. And so she is unable to use her superhero abilities. And so that's something that is very life-changing for her. And then on top of that, the Dark Fae, hundreds of years ago, they went off to attack the race of dragons. And when they did so, they accidentally kind of unleashed a curse. And so now, instead of them being able to do whatever they want, they actually cannot come up into the world except for the night of the full moon. So kind of playing off of werewolves and stuff like that. So instead of them being able to go and hunt for this magical object that they need to remove their curse, they get the main character to do it for them because she doesn't have any restrictions. She can be on the land. Also, the Dark Fae, they're kind of cursed because they can't go into kind of sacred, holy places. And so some of the magical objects they need in order to break this curse are in those sacred, holy places. And so, of course, they get Maeve Karn to go out and do their bidding. And of course, all she can think about is breaking the curse. But the kind of the irony to her situation is the fact that in order to break the curse, she needs to actually follow through and find these magical objects, put them together, and it will not only break her curse, but all curses known throughout all time. And so that's kind of the catch, like, should she do this or should she not do this? Because there's no knowing how many curses will be broken and kind of what chaos will be unleashed.
Interesting. Very cool. Lee, what about yours?
Okay, so I've got quite a few little curses in my books. The premise, I mean, I'm a big Evil Dead fan, and there was, hello, Kirsten. So I'm a big Evil Dead fan, and part of the sort of the antagonist almost is like it's more of a presence. It's more of an evil presence that can do various different curses. So we've got, you probably are already aware, if you've seen my book covers or anything, there's a lot of undead sort of zombies in there. So the first curse will be anything that dies under this curse will return from the dead. So that's the end of the curse, really. Now, there's another set of sort of monsters in the book called the Cursed Ones. So not a very original name when you were thinking about curses, but that's just what the people call them. But essentially, if they get bitten or wounded by one of the undead or someone that's under the influence of this darkness, they will then become sort of a bestial, evil creature. It's sort of like a running zombie almost that isn't dead. And when they die, they will then come back and join the ranks of the undead. So it gave me a chance to put sort of slow zombies and fast running zombies together. There's also the nature of the darkness, the evil, can sort of possess you as well. So there's certain characters that have been possessed and are now cursed by this. They have this voice in their head, and they sometimes they sleepwalk. And then there's one guy that sort of basically eats people in his sleep and doesn't know about it. There's all sorts of things like that. So we've got this sort of the possessive sort of evil possession type curse. We've got the cursed ones, and then we've got the dead, which is a curse as well. And there's going to be some other things that I probably shouldn't mention, which relate to a curse that will come in later on as well. So, but yeah.
That's pretty cool. All right. Well, this is a question for all of you guys. Why curses? Like, of all the storytelling routes that you could go to, put your character through whatever, or to build your world or your power base or whatever it was, what made you decide curses? Was it just like, okay, they're cursed, it's kind of easier, or was there like intention or thought behind it? Anyone can take this one.
I kind of think it was the easy way out for me, because I was trying to think what restrictions to put in place. And I was like, curses, that's just a kind of a catch-all. And it's pretty easy to say so-and-so can't do this because they are cursed. So I thought that'd be fun to play with. And also because I also like the idea of there not being any limitations. And so the fact that I love the idea that all curses would be broken. And it was kind of cool to kind of sit and think through what could happen if these curses were broken. So it was just kind of fun and just an easy route to go.
Very cool. Anyone?
I guess.
Go ahead, Craig. Go ahead.
Okay. I hadn't actually really consciously made a decision to write about curses. It's just kind of something that was happening there in the background of the story. And it wasn't really even until Angel suggested a theme of curses that I realized it really did work with my book. But it was something that was there in the background without me having ever thought the book's about curses. So, for example, as I mentioned earlier, the main characters are cursed with, on one side with immortality, which is good, but on the other side with being addicted to this smoke, which they must pay the piper. The piper has instilled this drive in them as a kind of fail-safe so that they will continue to do his bidding, but he kind of underestimated what addiction can do to people, so they end up becoming something which could actually unravel his design. So it's kind of a bit of an irony. But just to stop waffling and go back to the original question, I guess curses in literature in general have always been fascinating for me. I remember reading the Rime of the Ancient Mariner when I was at school, also a great Iron Maiden song. And I just love the fact that he kills this albatross and it dooms everyone on the ship. And I think things like that have always sort of been inside in the background for me.
Very cool.
That's about it.
Yes, I agree with Craig there. I mean, I've been through quite recently a lot of classical literature, even biblical stuff, and I've been finding some of the best curses all seem to have been done probably in Greek literature. Even in the Bible, there's some absolutely fantastic ones. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree. The best ones are some of the older ones there. But say in my stuff, it was completely accidental, really. I mean, it wasn't intended. I didn't set out to write a book about curses. I set out to write the horror novel set in a sort of fantasy world, really. It became a plot device, really. Just another layer of adding this, sort of depth to the novel. The cursed ones were definitely intentional, and that was the only really device I could think of where I could have a good reason for having slow walking undead and then running sort of infected. So I saw it was either a disease, which there's already a disease. It's similar to Kristin. There's already a plague in my books anyway. But so I went with a sort of more of a curse, more of a supernatural curse. But that was probably the only intentional curse that I put in there. The rest has all been a happy accident. So
nice. Kristin, what about you?
I was going to say mine was a little bit more like Angela's in that it developed from the world building. So I knew I had that seed of inspiration of where the story was going to be developed from. And I needed a consequence for, XYZ thing. And I thought a curse. I love curses. I think curses are super fun to play with and stories and to read about. And so that's how mine developed in a similar way, just before I started the book, when I was developing what it would look like.
I like it. Now, we'll switch gears a little bit. We'll talk about curses from other stuff. The one curse, as Angela was talking about superheroes and curses, I was trying to think, do I know any like cursed superheroes? And I think there's a few, especially Marvel. But the one that stands out to me, and I love this one, was when Loki cursed Deadpool to be super handsome. Like it was this one run, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, where he's got like a Tom Cruise like face. Like I think they sort of drew him like Tom Cruise, and nothing he did, he tries to blowtorch it off, or drops from a skyscraper onto his face, and nothing can destroy it. And that was probably the most interesting and of course amusing and creative use of curses. Can you guys think of other sort of ways that curses were used creatively in a story aside from your own? Because we've all established that you guys have come up with some pretty awesome and creative stuff, but other ones outside, in other books that you read, maybe ones that inspired you to write your curse or just stood out to you from the past.
I always really, really loved. I'm sorry for bringing this up because I know a lot of people don't like it, but again, a lot of people do. I mean, I'm a bit of a Mazalan fan, and I always thought I want to say Dragon Purr, the sword, is a bit of a curse in itself. The way it takes someone, it's almost like Elric's sword as well. I mean, they're cursed weapons.
Stormbringer.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's the one. But they capture a soul and in themselves are a curse. So just owning some things, because I always quite like those in the fantasy genre, definitely. And there's also quite notably, again, a huge one, but Lord of the Rings, the curse on the ring, the way it affects Gollum and the way it affects then the hobbits afterwards. I mean, that's an excellent curse, that is. Yeah.
You know what? You just reminded me that I do actually have curse in my series. There's a cursed dagger that absorbs souls. So I do belong on this podcast. What about anyone else have like a curse that stood out to them from previous books or something interesting and creative?
I think I was going to say something, but is Kristen talking without the microphone on? I'm not sure.
Sorry, I was talking to my son. My kids are all homeschooling, and I'm like, no, really, this is live. You have to actually, I know what you think you're being quiet, but you have to actually be quiet. So I apologize. But I was thinking, yes, Lord of the Rings, excellent, like probably for me, the quintessential curse, but also in TV. So our family, we have Disney Plus, and we're watching Once Upon a Time again. And that one it's a TV show, but it's, I don't, if anybody doesn't know, it's like fairy tale characters, and they come to the contemporary world, and it's all because of this curse. And it's all about, like the curse is the big thing of the whole show, and that they're cursed to not have their happy endings, and they don't remember each other from before. And the curse is like a huge part of that world building setup.
Interesting.
Okay. I guess I'm not going to mention Lord of the Rings because obviously that's a classic. But as Kristen said, fairy tales. I guess the idea of curses are instilled in you from a really early age. I remember the Curse of the Mummy and pirates' treasures being cursed. As I mentioned before, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, the dead decomposing albatross. But I think there was another one that stood out for me, which was, forgot what I was going to say, from the Iliad. One of the characters who, I think she knew the truth of everything. She knew everything that was going to happen, but the curse was that nobody believed her. So
Was that the goddess who ruled that island that he lands on? That wasn't Niobe, right?
No, I think that's in the Odyssey. No.
Yeah.
I can't even remember the name, but I remember quite liking that curse with the idea of being able to know everything, but nobody would ever believe you. Kind of frustrating. Feels a little bit like being a 6th grade teacher again.
Interesting. Now let me ask you guys this. I don't know if you guys are interested in these sort of things, but I always love tracing the origin of things. So like going back to the first appearance of, the gods in mythology, or the first appearance of, whatever it is. What would be the oldest example of like a curse? Like, for example, does Egyptian mythology feature curses that you know of? I'm pretty sure Beowulf, that's some variation on a curse. Where did this idea of curses even come from? I don't know if you guys know, or you just want to venture a thought on sort of the origin of curses for humanity.
Well, there's all different kinds of curses too. Like you can have a blood curse, like a generational curse, or an object can be cursed. And it's like timeless, like fairy tales and pirate stories. It's a thing.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And kind of even going back to like just pulling from the Bible, the story of Adam and Eve, like even though that was a creation story, it didn't take very long before they found themselves cursed. And so I think like that's kind of like one of the examples I always think about. And, it's kind of like woven throughout different stories. And even if you go to different mythologies and kind of read about creation and stuff, I think you'll kind of unveil like, oh, here's a curse hidden somewhere.
That's cool. I never thought of it, but yeah, God does curse them, right? He drives them out of the garden. And I think the word curse is actually used. I'm going to look up that. Lee, you were going to say something.
Yes, I mean, yes, that's fine. Thank you. The biblical thing, I mean, just to touch on what Angela was saying, yeah. I mean, I've been recently reading Edward Erdlach's Merkabah Rider series, and it's about a Jewish gunslinger, and it's very, very much steeped in the Old Testament. And he brings up there's Adam and Eve with the creation story, and then as Angela said, they get cursed, and then there's Lilith as well, who was added in to the Old Testament, we believe, later on, and she was, I believe if the lore is right in what he wrote, which is fiction, so it might not be, but I think it is right. She had a love affair with the angel of death, and they were both cursed. Or one of the angels who then became the angel of death. They were both cursed. So she was cursed to be the mother of all demons, and he was cursed to be then the angel of death, who never got to see anybody. He couldn't be only with the dead. I thought was quite fun. And you said about Beowulf earlier. I mean, Beowulf was, I think Craig might well know this because I know Craig is up on his classic literature. But I think it was about 1,000, just over 1,000 years ago that was written, or just under 1,000 years ago. Whereas the ancient Egyptian stuff, I mean, that was 3,000 years ago. I mean, I think that's probably one of the oldest. And a lot of the Greek, I mean, as Craig was mentioned, the Iliad and the Odyssey earlier, they were the oldest Greek. They're the oldest Western literature in history. So, and then there's curses in that, and some of that Greek stuff is drawn from the Egyptian sort of mythology as well. So that's definitely included in the same sort of hemisphere. So, I mean, I think possibly the oldest we've got on record, possibly Egyptian. I mean, I'm not sure, but it possibly is Egyptian. So, yeah.
This is going to be interesting to sort of trace it back to like even like the mythologies of ancient Africa, or the mythologies of like what was it called, Mesoamerica, or sort of like the primitive, like the first cultures. I think it would be really interesting to see if they included it in there, or if it's if it's a more modern, because you always hear about it in like Western stuff, the curse on the crops, or the curse on the animals, and that's like a super popular fantasy trope, which did stem from the more Western style of literature. A lot of influences are Greek and Roman, and of course Norse mythology. But then it's kind of interesting to see whether that's a shared mythology, or something that all the mythologies share, or if it's something more recent. Craig, you were going to say something.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just going back to what Lee was saying, and kind of taking the magic out of the whole curse idea for a moment. But I imagine it would have come from some kind of, like a deterrent. Don't rob from the tomb, otherwise you're going to be cursed. It's kind of like a punishment to strike fear into the hearts of the people. I guess it was playing on their superstitions and just trying to keep them good.
Yeah. So, speaking of, the tombs, it just made me think of the curse of the Pharaohs, right? Now, obviously, this is something that's super, super modern. Anne Rice really brought it in, center stage. But I think that's actually dating back to those early Egyptian dynasties where there was a curse placed on the tomb. And if anybody, so it says the curse, which doesn't differentiate between thieves and archaeologists, is claimed to cause bad luck, illness, or death.
Well, we even see memes about that, Andy, where they're like, a tomb was opened and that caused all the problems of 2020. So I feel like the idea of curses is pretty universal in different cultures. Like you were saying, like Egypt and Western, it's in the Bible. And even you could even say, okay, so what's your interpretation of curse? And you could say, even, as far as karma, what goes around comes around, that is almost a form of a curse. Like if you do this bad thing, something bad will happen to you. So it's like this universe's way of balancing things out. But in a way, you could almost think of that as a curse.
Interesting. I Googled, I did some light research like I always do. And so curses related to tombs date back to the 9th and 10th dynasty of Egypt. So one tomb has the warning, any ruler who shall do evil or wickedness to this coffin, may the god of choice not accept any goods he offers, and may his heir not inherit. And then another one says, as for all men who shall enter into my tomb impure, there will be judgment. An end shall be made for him. I shall seize his neck like a bird. I shall cast the fear of myself into him. So this is 4,000 or 5,000 years old, that these curses. So it's kind of cool to see that they really have been, or this superstition of curses has been around pretty much since man was able to think and talk and walk and, create some sort of society. A question for all of you. So you've written these curses into your stories. How did you go about sort of creating the parameters of the curse? So like, for example, the parameters of a curse are, what are the conditions of this person's curse, right? If they walk 2 steps outside of the line, something bad happens to them. So there's like an actual limit. The source of the power, right? A curse isn't just words. It's drawing on a power. Usually it's a god-based power or something, or the splash damage radius. Is it just the one person or everyone around them? So how did you guys go into sort of creating the curses that you wrote in to these stories?
Well, I have to admit, I did not think too hard about it at all. Just because I like to get down to like writing the story and not like kind of like dwelling too much. But I just kind of thought about the series is called Night of the Dark Fae because it's this kind of, they have one night every single month where they can just go out and cause like mass chaos and do whatever they want. And so I really just wanted to limit them to that one night every single month. And so that's kind of where I thought about the limitations. And then where the power is dwelling, or where the curse came from, I decided that the Dark Fae are very ambitious. Like they wanted to conquer the world. And so they've been going around conquering different kingdoms, like the most powerful kingdoms in the world. They would go out to battle and try to conquer them and take their magic. And so I kind of decided to pull in the curse. It's kind of based on corruption, and then also their deeds. And so when the curse came about, it was because they were attacking this amazing race, the race of dragons, and that kind of like caused it to happen. There are other things in there too, but not to give away any spoilers. And then I also wanted there to be a celestial or a divine relic in there, just because I like the ideal of there being either like divine celestials or gods, for people to kind of going back to that. They have this fear or something bad happening, or you want to make sure you obey these rituals, or you offer these sacrifices so that you don't anger the gods. And so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of like pull a little bit of that into the story as well.
I like it. So it is in a way playing off the classic Fae, the dark Fae, or the what is it, the Seelie and Unseelie courts, like that style?
A little little bit. I kind of went a little rogue just because it's been something that has been done so much. I kind of wanted to put my own unique spin on it. But yes, it does kind of allude to that.
Very cool. Who else? Who else wants to talk about how they created their curse?
I'll say I touched on it earlier, very, very lightly, about it was more of a plot device. So, I mean, I needed a way of having, so let's say, both kinds. I always wanted both kinds of the classic zombies, so the runners and I need the walkers. So I watched The Walking Dead, so walkers just springs to mind, but very much think walkers.
Yeah.
So it was very much a plot device, but the possession side of things that was much. I went about that a much different way. That was quite an accident, really. I saw an opportunity to sort of add in more layers of sort of paranormal horror with this possession stuff, and then I just sort of went with that. But say the zombie stuff was definitely planned, so I needed a way of doing both, and it was a choice between whether I go with the sort of the virus sort of disease, or whether it was sort of a divine thing, or whether it was, well, you have to discover what it actually is. It isn't either of those, but yeah. So there's definitely elements of both sort of styles as when I plotted out my books. So
very cool.
Is it me?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, just with the Ashen, obviously I've mentioned the way they're cursed a few times, but I had to put quite a few measures and rules in place to keep things on an even keel. So, for example, I don't, as Angela said, it's difficult to say too much without saying too many spoilers, but they're basically charged by the Piper to bring back smoke, which they pay as a currency to the Piper. And in that way, they're granted a power which kind of adds to their addiction, because they start getting a bit power hungry and it breeds rivalry between them. I don't want to say too much about the Piper, but he's from an ancient race, and the Ashen aren't the first people he's had trying to do this. So he sets these rules whereby if they break them, there will be penalties. For example, if they achieve an oath, then they will get the smoke, which they can pay, and then they can be rewarded. But if they break an oath or abandon it because it's too dangerous, then they will become breakers, and they become like a kind of hollow version of themselves, listless, wandering, and eventually they get called back to burn at the fire. And also, as I mentioned, there's a lot of rivalry between them, and out in the lands, who can say what will happen? But when they're within the fire circle, which acts as a kind of protective dome, then there's a penalty if they fight within that dome. So there's some funny situations where two enemies might meet at a fire, and then they have to be cordial for the time they're in the Piper's presence, because there'll be consequences if they cross any boundaries.
Very cool.
So mine is a little bit like Craig's in that the curse is tied to an oath. So my story premise came from an idea that from my husband's family. There's this tale of an ancestor of theirs. Her name's Jane Cronkite, and Jane married outside of her class. So she's in America, and she marries someone. I think he was a tradesman. So, and she was affluent, and so her family cut her off, and and the story, the family lore is that in 7 generations, her descendants would re-inherit her estate, and the estate was locked up. And it's been this huge conversation and lawyers and research and all this stuff. And I said to my husband a long time ago, I was like, if this is really like this huge Cronkite fortune that's been tied up for 7 generations, but the other children had access to it in some way, there is no way they would ever have access to these funds. Like, these funds are never coming. Like, let's just stop. Let's just quit. Like, we're never going to see this money. And I thought, if you wanted to keep assets, what lengths would you go to keep them? And so then that was sort of like the premise for where I started with my story idea. And so it translated into my book into two twin brothers, and they're supposed to switch the crown. So one has the crown for 5 generations, and then the other one has the crown for the next 5 generations. And then they're supposed to intermarry. And so then this family line, the Caracalla line in my book, they will keep the crown. And then I thought, well, the first son who has the crown, what will he do to keep the crown? And then, so like some of the other people here, you create a consequence. So I was like, okay, what if there was a curse? And if the oath was broken after so many generations, a curse will be unleashed. And so what does that curse look like? And how can that force change? Like, and what kind of opportunities and complications does this bring? So, so I came up with all of this because I love limited. I really wanted to write like a whimsical story, but at the end of the day, I am a limited magic person. So I had to have, before I even wrote really a chapter, I had everything like lined out. Like, here's the oath, here's the consequence, here's all the things, here's the opportunities, here's the parameters, here's like, what it can and can't do, and here's what is laid out as far as acceleration, because you want to accelerate your timeline and all of those things. So that was all built in, but really the curse was the consequence of a broken oath, just like in Craig's story. But in my story, it's already happened. So the consequences are already unleashed.
Very interesting. So we got time for one final question. We are stopping a little bit early. A final question for you all. This is not related to your stories. This is related to your real lives. You ready for this? Are you slightly superstitious, perhaps superstitious enough to believe that curses could possibly exist? I don't know if any of you guys, the knock on wood, throw salt over your shoulder, don't walk under a ladder, broken window, mirror kind of things. Well, if you're not too worried about your privacy, are you a little bit superstitious and believe in curses just a little bit?
I think so. Like, I always think that there's a lot of intent behind words, and I guess what you allow to kind of like enter your mind really influences your actions. So I guess I think that means that I believe in kind of like something else, something that's a little bit the strength of words. And so that's almost like them.
Manifesting mixed with self-fulfilling prophecy, with like a negative one mixed with a curse, all of that together. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Lee, you were going to say something.
Well, I unfortunately am quite superstitious. No matter how educated I seem to have got myself, I've still got this strange superstition. So a lot of my family on my mother's side are gypsies, and they will. I've heard of curses being done, gypsy curses being done on people, which is great. So I could probably even do one if I needed to. And also we are religiously. I don't really like talking about religion too much, but we're pagans in my family. And my wife practices a lot of witchcraft, and there's a certain amount of, obviously you've got to have quite a bit of superstition in that. But yeah, I'm very superstitious. I will not walk on the ladders. We've got one in the UK. I don't know if you have it in America, but we don't walk over 3 drains either. That's bad luck. Probably sensible in case they break. But there's also, I touch wood all the time as well. I'm always touching wood. If someone says something's bad, I cannot not touch wood. Yeah, so I'm very superstitious. But I know it's silly because I'm a man of science these days. But nonetheless, the old folklore prevails. So it's strange.
Where did that touch woods, that superstition come from? Does that have something to do with for some reason the idea of like Druidism popped into my head, where that connection with nature or the wood, or is there something totally different behind it?
I'm not 100%, but I've always taken it in that way. So it's almost like you're earthing the bad wood.
Yeah.
So almost like voicing something. If you voice something to the universe, you need to be careful what you say in case it comes true. So if you say something sort of negative, you touch wood and that earths through trees, through the roots. That's how I've always taken it. I don't actually know for a definite, but and that's how most of the people in my sort of peculiar community here in England, that's how we've all taken it. Because there's quite a few of us who are all a bit odd. And very things.
One last question before we move on. Are there superstitions in your music career? Like, I know actors have a lot of superstition. I don't know a lot about like musicians, professional musicians. Are there superstitions there that you follow or that you know other people follow?
I know some, but I personally don't have any superstition when it comes to music. I mean, I'll get up play in front of however many people, and it doesn't bother me at all. As long as I'm, probably a bit drunk. We're fine, really. So yeah, it's just on the saying things and then the general superstition, really, but not in the music world. No, that's not something I've ever really thought about.
Okay, cool. Craig, Kristen, what about you guys?
I'll go first then. Yeah, similar to Lee a little bit, but I'm not as superstitious now as I used to be when I was younger. But all of the touch wood, I still actually touch my head when I say it to this, like in general. And I used to have a big superstition about magpies. I don't know if that exists in the States or in Canada, but my granddad was always like, salute the magpie. And I had to draw a line under it because I was walking around the London Underground one day with my wife, and there was a poster with some magpies on it. And I was saluting the poster, and she said, "This has got to stop." So I think basically since then, yeah, I'm not really superstitious anymore compared to what I used to be anyway.
So I'm a little like Angela in that I feel like you can do self-fulfilling prophecies, or like Lee said, if you put it out into the universe, so so it's like me in control. So that's the way I like to think I am. And I have a black cat, and I love my black kitty, and I think she's amazing, and I will totally walk under ladders. But then when I say something and it kind of makes me nervous, I will knock on wood. Like, I will knock somebody over to get to wood so I can knock on the wood. So I think that I pick and choose my superstitions. But when it comes to knocking on wood, I will pull over the car and find some. So, and it's worked for me so far.
Get one of those wood panel vans and like knock on the outside or something just to be safe.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we are unfortunately out of time, have to jump off early. Before we go, why don't you all go around and tell our awesome viewers and listeners where they can find you and your books, starting with Kristen.
You can find my series, the Unchosen series, where I break like every trope and mess everything up. The first book is The Lilac Plague, and you can either follow me on Goodreads or Amazon. I'm on Instagram as Kristen Imagines, and I'm on Facebook as well. And I would love to connect with anyone who loves epic fantasy. I am here for that.
Woohoo! Craig.
Oh, I'm already unmuted. Similar to Kristen, I'm on most social media. Feel free to send me a message, to say hi. I'm always happy to talk to anyone, any fantasy fans about, anything really, but probably fantasy should be a good starting point.
Under CF Welburn, right?
Under CF Welburn. Actually, I might mention this. My website's going to be ready soon, hopefully, and Angela's helped me work on that. She's doing a great job. And normally I'm on Facebook or a little bit on Instagram, and that's about it, really. Very cool. Angela.
Yep. So you can find me on angelaj4.com. It's the hub for all the things. And all of my books are on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. So if you're in that program, you can read for free.
Very awesome. And last but not least, Lee.
Okay, so yeah, likewise, I'm on most of the social medias, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. If you type in Longsword Lee, you'll find me. I'm a longsword instructor, but in my spare time. But if you type in that, that'll come up with all my social media. You can go to my website, www.leeconleyauthor.com. Again, I'm on Kindle Unlimited, and it's all on Amazon. You should be able to search me up on Barnes & Noble or Waterstones, depending on which country you're in as well. So yeah, I'm fairly easy to find. Just give me a Google and you'll find me. So come say hi.
Very awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this special episode of the Fantasy Fiends show. For those of you who are watching, we will be back on Thursday night with another episode. We are joined this week by someone whose name I can't remember, but who is a really awesome guest and a really awesome topic. And of course, Stevie will be here to ruin the show with terrible puns. Like had he been here, he would have said, last but not least, but we're glad he's not here so that he doesn't do that. So we will see you on Thursday night. Goodbye. Everybody say goodbye and wave at the camera. Ha ha!